They say betrayal doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it slips into your life with the rustle of paper. It was an ordinary Thursday, the kind that smells like old coffee and quiet obligations. I was sitting in my parents' narrow study, the walls lined with dusty books they never read and picture frames that hadn't changed in a decade. I'd been helping my father Robert with financial paperwork for years. So when he called and asked if I could scan a few documents, I didn't hesitate. Routine, I thought. Comfortably numb. The scanner clicked its mechanical rhythm as I fed in sheet after sheet. Legal agreements, bills, a few handwritten notes. And then a folder, dots cream-colored, labeled in Robert's careful cursive, last will and testament. I shouldn't have opened it. But curiosity is a dangerous inheritance. Inside, I found their legacy, neat and final. Every asset, every dollar, every thread of their carefully woven safety net left to Chloe. Chloe, my younger sister, the untamed one, the dreamer who never paid a single bill, but collected second chances like seashells. The one they praised at every dinner party for her spirit, even when that spirit had cost them tens of thousands. And me? A footnote. A line, we love both our daughters dearly. That was it. No mention of the 2 mortgages I'd quietly paid to keep the lights on in this very house. No gratitude for covering the roof repair last winter, when Robert pretended the leak wasn't that bad. No record of the credit card I'd co-signed, or the legal advice I'd provided pro bono. I sat there, paralyzed. The room swam in slow circles, the scanner's hum morphing into a cruel lullaby. My hands trembled, my breath hitched. I felt both everything and nothing, like standing waist deep in snow and realizing your skin has gone numb. Robert called from the kitchen, voice cheerful, unaware. You want some coffee, Em? I responded somehow. Sure. It wasn't my voice. It was something hollow, something that had cracked. I took the cup from his hand and looked into his eyes, but all I could think was, how do you sit across from people who've already buried you emotionally? They didn't see it. Of course they didn't. I was the reliable one, the steady branch, the built-in support system. I went home that night in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the ceiling of my apartment in Midtown, watching headlights pass across the walls like ghosts of moments I couldn't name. They had made their choice. They had written me out. I wouldn't ask them why. I wouldn't plead. But I would answer, not with words, with silence and precision. I didn't speak to them the next day. Instead, I moved through my routines with a calmness that felt foreign, like I'd borrowed someone else's skin. Morning coffee, a half-hearted run along the Midtown Trail, answering emails in my office at Franklin Group, where numbers made more sense than people ever had. But beneath the surface, something was shifting, quiet tectonic movement, a rebalancing. I didn't rage. I didn't confront. That would have given them power, acknowledgement, permission to explain. I didn't want their reasons. I wanted my life back. So I started with the smallest threads. First, I logged into the mortgage portal, the one I'd been silently paying for them $1,374 every month, set on auto-deduct for the last 4 years. I hit cancel. Not a dramatic gesture, just a click. Simple, quiet, irrevocable. Next, I turned off the utilities. Gas, electricity, water, all paid under my name, masked under family support. I left them in the dark, literally. Then, the credit card. The one I co-signed so they could keep the lights on, when Chloe decided she wanted to be a yoga instructor in Spain for a summer. The limit was modest. The interest was not. I called the bank and removed myself as guarantor. Their debt was now theirs alone. 2 weeks passed. Silence. Until it wasn't. The first message arrived from Robert. Emily, the property taxes are due. Can you transfer today? Not a greeting. Not a question. An expectation dressed as routine. I stared at the message, like it belonged to someone else. Then I typed back 5 words, a scalpel in sentence form. Ask Chloe. It's her house. I hovered. My finger trembled just slightly above the send button, but only once. Then I tapped, and the storm began. Sandra called, her voice like static soaked in tears. Left voicemails, 3 of them, each one a crescendo of guilt and disbelief. Please don't do this. We need to talk. Talk? Now? They hadn't asked to talk when they made legal decisions without me, when they scribbled my worth into a single vague sentence. They hadn't talked when Chloe needed a car, and they used the savings I had replenished to buy her a brand new Tesla. I'd driven the same reliable Nissan for years. No. Now they could sit in their own silence. Then came Chloe. You're being dramatic. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. The audacity, I thought, was almost artistic. I responded without punctuation, letting the words land sharp and cold. You mean the money you're inheriting? Use that. Her reply was instant. You know I don't have that kind of cash. And for the first time in weeks, I laughed. A bitter, tight laugh, edged with exhaustion. Then figure it out, Chloe. From there, the unraveling spiraled. They begged. They recruited others, Uncle Mark, who hadn't spoken to me since the Christmas I forgot to bring wine, now suddenly texting like a diplomat. I blocked them all, but I wasn't finished. Not yet. Because it wasn't enough for them to feel confused. I needed them to feel accountable, to feel what I had unseen, essential, expendable. I turned my attention to the insurance. Their home insurance had been under my policy, my plan. I'd managed their claims, read the fine print, paid the premiums. So I reduced it to the legal minimum. No bells, no whistles, just enough to check a box. 3 weeks later, a pipe burst. Bathroom flooding. Thousands in damages. I sipped chamomile tea that night as the messages rolled in frantic, panicked, disbelieving. I didn't answer. Not then. And certainly not when the next blow hit. Chloe's car. She hadn't known I had the authority to refinance the loan until she opened her new statement. Higher rate, triple payments. Independence, I thought, comes with interest. She posted about hard times on Instagram. Grainy selfies with captions about growth and betrayal. I scrolled. I smiled. I slept. But still, it wasn't enough. One final move remained. The HOA. They'd never read the regulations. Never cared that their lawn was 2 inches too tall, or that their fence leaned 5 degrees off code. But I had read them. Thoroughly. I filed anonymous complaints. Every infraction. Every violation. By the time the letters arrived in their mailbox, fines stacking, warnings thick with legal threat, I was already sipping wine on my balcony, Daniel's hand on mine, the city quiet around us. Let the system teach them now. I had nothing more to say. At least, not yet. For weeks after the HOA letter storm, my phone was eerily quiet. No more voicemails drenched in parental despair. No more Chloe bursts on Messenger. No more pseudo-diplomatic texts from Uncle Mark. Just the sound of the city outside my window, muffled sirens, distant laughter, the occasional metallic groan of a garbage truck sliding through the alley below my building, and silence. A silence that, at first, felt like freedom. I filled the empty space with noise, poured myself into spreadsheets at work, took on extra client portfolios, stayed late, left early. My supervisor praised the fire in me. I smiled, nodded. It was easy to seem productive when you were trying not to feel anything else. Daniel noticed the difference before I did. We were eating lunch in the tiny break room on the 18th floor, both hunched over wilted salads, when he looked up mid-bite and said, "You seem lighter." I blinked. "Lighter?" He shrugged. Unburdened. "I don't know. Like something shifted." I didn't respond, just stabbed a tomato until it bled onto the plastic plate. I wasn't unburdened. I was suspended, somewhere between detachment and obsession. Because here's what I didn't tell anyone. I checked Chloe's Instagram stories every day. I zoomed in on blurry backgrounds, looking for signs of stress, a messy kitchen, a stack of unpaid bills peeking from a countertop, a shadow of her former smugness, thinning under bad lighting. I drove past their house once, then again. The lawn was dying. The shutters hung at odd angles. Paint peeled from the trim like shedding skin. I didn't knock. I didn't slow down, but I watched, obsessively, as if suffering were a performance, and I was the only audience who understood the subtext. Daniel caught me once. We were in bed, his arm slung over my waist, my back pressed against the quiet rise of his breath. I thought he was asleep. I was scrolling. A flicker of Chloe's profile. Another passive-aggressive post. When family turns on you, you find out who really matters. Daniel stirred behind me. Still watching them? My thumb froze. I wasn't. You were. Silence stretched between us. Not angry, not accusing, just tired. He sat up, blanket falling from his chest, the soft lamp beside the bed catching on the stubble along his jaw. His voice was gentle. "Emily, what exactly are you hoping to see?" I didn't answer. What was I hoping for? A collapse? A breakdown? An apology captioned in sepia? Or was I just waiting for them to reach some cosmic quota of pain? One that would finally justify my own? Daniel watched me, and then said something so quietly it nearly vanished into the air. "You're not free if you're still orbiting them." I hated how right he was. That night, I didn't sleep. My thoughts kept looping a carousel of justifications and bitter memories. I remembered Chloe's smirk when she crashed the first car and said, "It's not my fault. The brakes suck." I remembered Robert patting my shoulder after I got promoted, only to ask if my raise could cover Sandra's dental work. I remembered standing in the kitchen, sipping their cheap coffee, knowing I'd just been written out of my own family. I got out of bed at dawn and called my therapist, left a voicemail, asked for an emergency session. When the appointment came, I spilled everything, not just the will or the revenge, but the weight of expectation. The way my parents had never said thank you, but always said you're so responsible, as if my value lived in my ability to absorb damage without complaint. She listened, took notes. Her expression never flinched. When I finished, she tilted her head. "You're grieving," she said softly. I blinked. "Grieving? Not just them," she continued, "but the version of you who believed you were seen, valued. You're grieving the illusion." That word illusion stuck to me like honey, sweet and heavy and hard to wash off. I went home that evening and sat in the middle of my apartment. No phone, no laptop, just me. The silence this time didn't feel victorious. It felt raw. A few days later, I drove back to Westboro, not to confront, not even to speak, just to look. I parked across from the house and stared at the chipped paint, the overgrown hedge. It was strange, really, how something that once represented so much comfort could now feel like a mausoleum of misplaced loyalty. Then, a flicker behind the window, a face, Sandra. Her eyes met mine, and something shifted in her posture, a stillness. Then she disappeared behind the curtain. 30 seconds later, the door creaked open. She stepped out in slippers and a mismatched sweater, her hair unkempt, her voice barely above the breeze. "We lost the house," she said. I didn't speak. The bank gave us until Christmas to move out. Still, I said nothing. She looked down at the porch beneath her feet, and when she spoke again, it cracked. "Chloe moved in with her girlfriend. She's working now. Hardware store." That surprised me. "Full-time?" Sandra nodded. "Seems different." A pause. Then, "Why, Emily? Why did you do all this?" The question I had burned with for months turned back toward me. Why? Because they erased me. Because they made me believe that love was earned in silence and sacrifice. Because I was tired of being a pillar in a house that never sheltered me. But all I said was, "Because you made me responsible for everything and left me nothing in return." Sandra's face crumpled. "We thought you didn't need it. You always had everything together." "Chloe, she didn't." I laughed, a sound more exhausted than amused. "So I was punished for being strong." She didn't respond, just nodded, a mother folding in on herself under years of missed understanding. Inside, Robert was in his chair, thinned by stress and age. When he saw me, his jaw tightened. I expected bitterness, maybe defensiveness. Instead, he said my name. And then, "Are you here to gloat?" I shook my head. "No." "Then why?" "I don't know," I whispered. And maybe that was the truth. Not revenge, not pity, just the quiet ache of wanting something whole in the ruins of what never was. The house didn't smell the same. That's what hit me first when I crossed the threshold. The old scent of cinnamon and dryer sheets had been replaced with something hollow, a trace of mildew, a whisper of stale air, as though the walls themselves had stopped breathing. Sandra led me to the living room, and I saw how far things had unraveled. The coffee table was gone, replaced by a cardboard box doubling as furniture. The recliner Robert sat in sagged more than I remembered, and the curtains drooped like they'd forgotten how to hang. It was a shrine to what used to be, now stripped of pride. Robert looked smaller, grayer. His shoulders slumped under a weight that wasn't just age. When I walked in, he didn't say anything for a long moment, just watched me like I was a ghost that had decided to haunt them in daylight. "You want something to drink?" Sandra asked. Her voice was too soft, like she was speaking to someone who might break or vanish. I shook my head. We sat in silence, each of us tethered to an unspoken past. Then Robert finally spoke. His voice was rough, dry like paper. "I suppose you're happy now." It wasn't a question. It was a test. I didn't rise to it. "I'm not interested in happy," I said. "I was interested in clarity." He nodded, slowly, as if the word alone had weight. He looked down at his hands. "We changed the will," he said. I didn't flinch. "Not that it matters now," he added bitterly. "There's not much left." Of course there wasn't. I didn't come for money. I never had. I came because part of me still clung to the illusion that anything could be salvaged from this wreckage. "We thought you didn't need it," he continued after a pause. "You had your life in order. Chloe, she was always a little lost. She was never expected to be found," I replied. He didn't argue, just stared out the window, as if searching for answers in the bare branches swaying outside. Eventually, I stood to leave. I didn't owe them more than this visit. But just before I reached the door, Sandra asked, "Do you know anyone who could help us find an apartment?" I paused. They didn't say it out loud, but I could hear the echo behind her words. Not money, just help, guidance, direction. So I nodded. "I'll look into a few places." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was a line drawn in the sand. "I will help, but I won't carry you anymore." Over the next few weeks, I made good on that offer. I connected them with a local agency that specialized in senior housing. Found them a modest apartment on the east side. Nothing glamorous, but clean, safe, and affordable. I gave them a spreadsheet with what they could sell to cover the moving costs, and even offered to help with the listings. Not the payments, just the logistics. Daniel watched all of this unfold with quiet curiosity. He never asked why. He only offered silent presence and arm around my shoulder during phone calls, a second pair of eyes for rental agreements. His support wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. One night, as we sat on our tiny balcony watching the city shimmer through the spring haze, he turned to me and said, "You've done enough." "I don't know what that means anymore," I whispered. He took my hand. "It means you're not their foundation. You're your own." I nodded, but didn't speak. Let the thought hang in the air like incense, slowly sinking into my bones. And then, unexpectedly, Chloe reached out. It was a Monday, gray, unremarkable. Her text read, "Can we talk? Just coffee. Nothing dramatic." I stared at the message for 23 minutes before replying. Sure. 1 hour, Cafe Bloom, 5 p.m. She was already there when I arrived, wearing a button-down shirt that didn't belong to her usual aesthetic, hair tied back. No jewelry, no drama. She stood when I approached, like she wasn't sure if this counted as a reunion or a peace offering. "Thanks for coming," she said. I didn't say anything, just sat. She ordered chamomile. I had black tea. And then she did the one thing I didn't expect. She apologized. For everything. Not just the money. Not just the car. Not even the will. But for all of it. For letting you carry the weight, she said. For never stepping up. For watching you be the grown-up and pretending that was normal. I studied her face, searching for sarcasm or deflection. But all I saw was someone really trying to be accountable. "I thought being the golden child meant I was special," she continued. "But it just meant I was protected from consequences." I didn't interrupt. "And you were the reliable one, so they thought you didn't need anything. But you did. You needed to be seen." A pause. She sipped her tea. "And I'm sorry for not seeing you." I still didn't speak. Not because I didn't have words, but because I was afraid if I opened my mouth, I'd cry. When she finally left, I sat there long after, staring into the swirl of my unfinished tea. I didn't forgive her that day, but I agreed to meet again, and that was something. A few weeks later, I visited Sandra and Robert's new apartment. It was smaller, lighter, humble in a way their old house had never been. They had sold the furniture that once belonged to other lives. Now, they were surrounded by secondhand things and first-time peace. Sandra was painting again. Abstract landscapes, blues and silvers. She offered to show me. I declined gently. Robert had joined a book club at the local library. They were reading The Old Man and the Sea. Fitting. They didn't ask for money. They didn't mention the will. And I didn't bring up the past. We sat. We talked. Not about pain, not about betrayal, just the weather, books, how spring was coming early. When I left, Robert said, "Thank you." I didn't say you're welcome. I just nodded. Sometimes, silence is enough. I drove past the old house one last time. Not to look, not to feel. Just because I was in the neighborhood, or so I told myself. The porch swing was gone. The hedges were trimmed. A bright blue coat of paint covered the peeling beige siding. New flowers lined the walkway. A toddler toddled near the edge of the driveway, a golden retriever weaving playfully around her feet. A woman, maybe 30, stood nearby with a watering can in hand. She waved at the child, laughed. That laughter echoed through the air and hit nothing inside me. No nostalgia, no grief, no rage, just stillness. That was the first time I knew, truly, that I was free. Not the performative kind of freedom, not revenge masquerading as autonomy, but the quiet kind. The kind that hums beneath your skin when you stop trying to be seen by people who never learned how to look at you. It had taken years of silence to realize that my value didn't lie in being useful, that love and obligation were not synonyms. I parked the car for a moment and breathed in the late afternoon air. Warm, sharp with early pollen, tinged with something clean and new. Then I drove away without looking back. A few weeks later, Chloe invited me over. Not to the old house. Not to some awkward family function with cold lasagna and veiled tension, but to her own apartment, small, organized, humming with effort. She'd hung plants near the window. There was a corkboard with her work schedule tacked up. Receipts neatly filed. A folder labeled Community College, spring term. We sat on the floor with coffee. No couch yet. Just a rug and 2 pillows. "I've been reading about compound interest," she said, as if that alone was a love letter to a former version of herself. "Dangerous knowledge," I replied. She grinned. "Teach me more?" And so I did. I showed her how to build a basic investment plan, how to balance savings with debt. She asked questions, real ones, took notes, didn't interrupt, and for the first time in our lives, we were just sisters. No hierarchy, no resentment, no silent ledger of who owed what. When I got up to leave, she hugged me. Awkward, sincere. "Thanks, Em," she said into my shoulder, "for not giving up on me." I didn't say I almost did. Didn't say you made it impossible to care for a long time. All I said was, "You're doing the work, one see that." And I meant it. My parents' new apartment was modest, but it suited them. Sandra had converted a corner of the living room into a painting nook. She sent me a photo of a lake. She'd painted swirls of silver and gray with streaks of violet. "Supposed to be reflection on water," her message read. "Not sure it worked," I replied. "It's beautiful. Looks like the sky is remembering something." She sent a heart emoji, one small heart. Robert was quieter these days. When I visited, he asked how work was. He didn't mention money, didn't ask if I was dating anyone. Just sat across from me, legs crossed, hands on his knees, like someone trying to memorize the shape of accountability. Sometimes that's the most we can ask of those who've hurt us, to sit with what they've done, to not run from it, to not justify it, to simply say, "I was wrong, and I see you now." They never said that in those exact words, but they did show it in gestures, in the lack of expectation, in the way they asked if I had time, instead of assuming I'd rearrange my life to fit theirs. It wasn't a perfect repair, but it was something real. Daniel and I grew into something steady, not wild, not fast, just grounded. He moved in during late spring, brought with him an espresso machine, an old copy of Walden, and a small cactus he named Harold. On a warm evening in June, we sat on our balcony, sipping wine and watching the city swallow the sun in soft bursts of gold and rust. "You're not the same person I met 2 years ago," he said. "I hope not." He looked at me, eyes soft but steady. "You're not carrying as much." "No," I said. I finally put some of it down. Then, after a pause, "It's strange. I thought letting go would feel like weakness, like surrender, but it's the strongest thing I've ever done." He took my hand. "Letting go is what makes space for everything else." I pressed my forehead to his shoulder. "I used to think I had to earn love, Prove I was worthy of it. You don't, he whispered. You just have to receive it. That night, we talked about the future. Marriage, maybe. A cabin one day. A dog, not too loud. Maybe two. Not once did I think about whether my parents would approve. That was freedom too. For Christmas, the first sent Sandra and Robert a card. Nothing elaborate. Just a single folded note with my handwriting across the page. I'm still figuring things out. But I'm trying. A week later, I received one back. It read, "So are we. Thank you for the chance." No check. No plea. Just acknowledgement. It was enough. The last page in this chapter wasn't loud. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation at a holiday dinner or a viral video of Karma doing cartwheels. It was quiet. It was Emily in a life she built herself, in a home where love didn't come with conditions, in a body no longer tensed for disappointment. It was choosing to stay soft after being hardened by years of emotional erosion. It was realizing that forgiveness wasn't approval, it was reclaiming peace. That boundaries weren't walls, they were doors that could be opened or closed with intention. And it was understanding, finally, that she was never just a walking retirement plan. She was Emily, and her legacy would be her own. Story 2. The truth hit me on a Tuesday. It was subtle at first, too quiet, too comfortable. I'd walked into my parents' house to drop off some cash for the electric bill, same as every other week, and there it was. My mom, perfectly healthy, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, cheering on my nephews as they battled Goombas and Super Mario. She was laughing, full-on belly laughing. And in that one ridiculous pixelated moment, I realized everything I thought I knew was a lie. My name's Ethan. I'm 33 now. But this happened when I was 31, still juggling 2 jobs and a toddler. My daughter Mia was 3 at the time, sharp as a tack, and endlessly curious. My wife, Dana, worked nights at the hospital, which meant babysitting was sometimes a logistical nightmare. So naturally, I'd asked my mom, Karen, for help. I wasn't expecting her to raise my kid, I just needed one night, a few hours. But she told me she was too sick, too tired, could barely move, let alone chase a toddler. I believed her. I offered to pay her for her time just like I always did when I covered their rent, their groceries, their overdue car insurance. And she said no with a breathless cough, and that weak smile she wore whenever she played the victim card. So imagine the gut punch when I walked in, cash envelope still in hand, and saw her laughing and gaming with my sister's kids like she was training for the Grandma Olympics. My mom spotted me first. Her face paled for half a second, then snapped back into that too sweet smile. "Ethan, what a surprise," she chirped, bouncing my nephew on her knee like nothing was wrong. I looked around at her, at my sister Lindsay, at my dad Mark, sinking into his recliner like he wished he could vanish. "You said you couldn't watch Mia because you weren't feeling well," I said, voice low but steady. Silence, the kind that makes the air feel heavier. Lindsay was the first to break it. "Mom's got a lot on her plate, Ethan. Don't be dramatic." I looked at her, then back at Mom. "She's literally babysitting." Karen sighed and rubbed her temple, like I was the one causing a headache. "It's different," she said. "Lindsay's got her hands full." I blinked. The math wasn't mathing. Lindsay had 3 kids, yes, but she also had a husband who actually lived at home and helped. Dana and I were teaming parenthood through opposite schedules and financial strain. And I was still the one footing my parents' bills. But apparently, I was asking too much. I looked at her and asked point blank, "Do you think Lindsay needs you more than I do?" The answer was in the pause. The way my dad wouldn't meet my eyes, the way Lindsay rolled hers, and the way Karen said nothing. That was all I needed. I told them I finally understood 32 years of being the second string, the fallback guy, the ATM with a pulse. And now I was done. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just turned around, walked out, and left the envelope on the coffee table. The car ride home was a blur of streetlights and static. When I walked in, Dana was sitting at the kitchen counter, sipping tea. She looked up at my face and knew. I told her everything, every word, every fake cough and manipulated guilt trip. She listened quietly, then asked me, "So what now?" That night, I drafted the final budget without my parents. Rent? Gone. Utilities? Cut off. Grocery deliveries? Canceled. One text sent to both of them. You're on your own now. Good luck." Then I blocked them. It was the most peaceful sleep I'd had in years. The fallout came fast. Calls from unknown numbers. Emails with subject lines like, "Please, Ethan," and "You're being unfair." I ignored them all. Then they started calling Dana. She answered exactly 0 of them, her silence a symphony. That's when Karen did what she always did. She went public. A long Facebook post about her ungrateful son who abandoned his sick mother. It was dramatic, vague, and so performative I half expected a GoFundMe link at the bottom. I didn't respond, not directly. Instead, I wrote a brief, honest post of my own. For years, I paid my parents' bills and believed my mom was too sick to babysit. Turns out, she just didn't want to, and she was fine babysitting my sister's kids while lying to me about her health. I'm not angry anymore, just done. The comments poured in support from extended family, old friends, even neighbors who'd seen my mom out shopping or gardening on days she claimed to be bedridden. Lindsay took the biggest hit. Her image as the overworked single mom cracked wide open when people started asking how she had time for beach trips and salon days if she was barely getting by. Apparently the lies had layers. Then came the knock on my door. It was 3 days after the post. Through the peephole, I saw them, Karen and Mark, standing on my porch like lost tourists. I opened the door but didn't let them in. Karen's voice cracked. "Please, Ethan, can we talk? We're your parents." I didn't move. "Talk." Mark cleared his throat. "We didn't mean for it to get this far." I shook my head. "You didn't mean for me to find out." "Big difference." Karen stepped forward, reaching for my arm. I stepped back. "Sweetheart, we're struggling. The electric company's threatening to shut us off. Rent's overdue. Is that really what you want?" I almost laughed. "You have options. Dad can get a job. You can move into a smaller place. Or wild idea, Lindsay can finally chip in." Karen's expression hardened. "After everything we've done for you," I cut her off. "Name one thing from the last 10 years that wasn't about what I could do for you." Silence. "I'm not punishing you. I'm just done funding my own neglect." Then I shut the door. And for the first time, I felt free. The weeks that followed were blissfully quiet. Dana and I took Mia to the zoo. We started house hunting, something we'd postponed for years because of family emergencies and overdrafts that weren't ours. I even got a raise at work, thanks to no longer missing meetings over sudden calls from my mom about emergencies that turned out to be nothing more than Wi-Fi issues or missing Amazon packages. But of course, peace never lasts. I started hearing things through coworkers, mutual relatives, even an old family friend who still followed Karen on Facebook. She was telling people I'd had a breakdown. Lindsay claimed I was unstable and money obsessed. It stung, but not as much as I expected. I'd expected it. Then my Aunt Diane called. She wasn't close with my parents anymore. She'd seen through Karen long ago, but she wanted me to know. "They're saying you're spiraling, that you've cut off everyone." I laughed. "Did they also mention I was the one who paid their bills for 5 years?" She sighed. "I just wanted you to know. Mark tried to get his old job back. No one's hiring. Lindsay asked me for a loan last week. That caught me off guard." "You didn't give it to her, did you?" "No," she said. "I told her to ask the brothers she ignored for a decade." Touche. But even knowing all that, a part of me, the old, reliable Ethan, felt something. Not guilt exactly, but the ghost of it. I told Dana. She listened, then said, "You supported them longer than most people would have. But you were never their son, you were their safety net." And as much as it hurt to hear, she was right. That night, we sat on the back porch, watching Mia chase fireflies. I felt something shift. Not sadness, not regret. Just release. It came in the mail, tucked between a coupon flyer and a reminder from our dentist. No return address. But the handwriting on the envelope was unmistakable, Karen's fancy cursive, the same she'd use on birthday cards when I was a kid. Inside was a Christmas card. A generic one, store-bought, with a smiling family photo on the front: Karen, Mark, Lindsay, and her kids. Everyone beaming like we hadn't all torn each other apart months ago. On the back, just 3 words in her handwriting: "We miss you." No apology, no explanation, not even a signature, just that. I stared at it for a second longer than I should have. Then I tossed it in the trash. That evening, Dana and I were hanging ornaments on the tree. Mia was upstairs pretending to be asleep. which usually meant she was whispering to her stuffed animals and hiding cookies under her pillow. I was wrapping lights around the middle branches when the doorbell rang. I figured it was a neighbor or a package. Dana offered to get it, brushing glitter off her hands. But then she called back to me, softly, "Ethan, it's your dad." I froze. Mark was standing there alone. No Karen, no Lindsay. Just him, hands in his coat pockets, looking smaller than I remembered. The kind of tired that didn't just come from age. It came from something breaking inside and never quite healing right. "Can we talk?" he asked, voice low. I nodded and stepped aside. Dana gave me a look supportive but cautious, then quietly took Mia upstairs. We sat across from each other in the living room, the Christmas tree blinking quietly between us. "She doesn't know I'm here," he said first. "Your mother." I leaned back in my chair. "That makes two of us surprised." Mark let out a tired laugh. "She'd lose it if she knew I came. But I owed you this. I didn't say anything. I didn't trust what might come out. I let you down," he continued. "Not just now, for years. I stood there and watched your mom treat you like you were some walking ATM. I should have spoken up. Should have stopped it." He rubbed his face, like even saying the words made him feel heavier. It was easier to keep the peace, to let her have her way and keep my head down. But I see now what that cost you. I wasn't sure what to say. It wasn't like I hadn't imagined this moment. But in those daydreams, I usually said something cutting and walked away victorious. But this version, it just felt sad. "You're not wrong," I finally said. "You watched it all happen." He nodded. "I did. And I'm sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just didn't want to go another year pretending I hadn't failed you." We sat there in the quiet, save for the faint rustle of Mia's footsteps upstairs. "I didn't walk away out of spite," I said. "I walked away because I finally understood nothing was ever going to change. Not unless I changed it myself." Mark looked down at his hands. "We moved in with Lindsay for a while. That caught my attention." "How'd that go?" He gave a humorless smile. "Let's just say Lindsay enjoyed being the favorite a lot more when it came with free babysitting and money. She wasn't thrilled about suddenly being the caretaker." I let out a dry laugh. "No kidding. We're in a small apartment now. Retirement pay barely covers it. Your mom's still convinced this is just a phase you'll snap out of." "She's wrong," I said quietly. He looked at me, something unreadable in his expression. "I know, but I just wanted you to know. I'm proud of you. For stepping away. For choosing something better." It was the first time in my life my father said those words. He stood to leave. I walked him to the door. Before he stepped out into the snow, he paused. "Merry Christmas, son. You've got a beautiful little girl. You're a better dad than I ever was." And then he walked away. I watched him until his car disappeared around the corner. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. Just calm. The new year rolled in quiet and clean. We moved into a house a few neighborhoods over, bigger backyard, better schools. Dana and I called it our clean slate house. Mia turned 4 that spring. She wanted a dinosaur cake and an obstacle course in the backyard. We made both happen, even if it meant I had frosting on my ceiling for a week. Mark started calling once a month. Just quick updates. I kept the conversations polite but cautious, like you do with someone who's rebuilding a bridge they once helped burn down. Karen never called. Then, in May, I got a text from Lindsay. "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a good minute before typing back. "Why?" "I think I owe you an apology." So we met. Neutral ground. A small cafe halfway between her place and my office. I didn't know what to expect. Lindsay had spent most of our lives in the role of golden child, wearing it like a crown she never questioned. But when she walked in, something was different. No makeup, no smugness, just tired eyes and a tight grip on her coffee cup. "Thanks for coming," she said. I nodded. "You said you had something to say." She looked down, then back up at me. "You were right. About all of it." I stayed quiet. When Mom and Dad moved in, I thought it'd be easy. I thought they'd help with the kids. Maybe take some pressure off. But they didn't. They just expected everything. Mom criticized everything I did. My parenting, my cooking, even my marriage. Dad sat around, didn't say a word. She laughed, bitter and sharp. After 2 months, I kicked them out. I raised an eyebrow. "You?" "Yeah." I couldn't take it anymore. It was like suddenly I understood what it felt like to be you. We sat in silence for a moment. "I let you carry everything for so long," she said. I never questioned why you were so tired all the time, or why you stopped coming around. I just assumed Mom was right that you were dramatic, or selfish. But I see now, you were just exhausted. I didn't soften right away. Apologies are nice, but they don't erase decades. I'm not asking for us to be close, she added. I'm trying to do better. For my kids, I want to stop the cycle. That hit harder than I expected. I nodded slowly. Then maybe this is a start. We talked a little longer. Safe topics, weather, work, the cost of everything. And when we left, it wasn't with hugs or promises. Just a quiet understanding. Back home, Mia ran to hug my legs the second I walked through the door. Dana looked up from the couch, curious. I gave a small shrug. It went okay, I said. We'll see. That night, after Mia was in bed, I stepped out onto the porch, looked up at the stars, and took a deep breath. I wasn't chasing apologies anymore. I wasn't clinging to what should have been. I wasn't anyone's second choice, or backup plan, or human wallet. I was just me, still healing, still figuring it out, but free. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. Summer passed gently, the way it does when you're no longer waiting for the next disaster. We planted tomatoes in the backyard, built Mia a swing. Most nights we sat on the porch, Dana's feet in my lap, Mia chasing fireflies or drawing on the sidewalk with chalk. It was quiet, peaceful, and I didn't realize how much I needed that stillness until I finally had it. The calls from Mark kept coming. Once a month, sometimes less. Never long, always soft. He never asked for anything. Sometimes he'd just talk about the weather or the birds he saw that morning. A small connection. Fragile, but real. Karen still hadn't reached out directly, and honestly, I was okay with that. But peace doesn't mean everything's fixed. Sometimes, it just means you've stopped bleeding. That fall, I found out they'd been evicted again. This time from the apartment they'd found after Lindsay booted them. My Aunt Diane called and said Karen was living with a cousin across town, but it wasn't going well. No surprise. Mark was couch surfing, trying not to get in the way. They're reaping what they sowed, Diane said. But I thought you'd want to know. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I appreciate it. She paused. You still okay? Yeah, I said. I really am. But later that night, as I was brushing Mia's hair before bed, I caught myself wondering what happens when they really can't take care of themselves. When Mark gets sick? When Karen needs more than just rent money? I didn't have an answer, just a question that lingered in my bones. Around Thanksgiving, I got a letter. Not a card, not a Facebook message. A real letter. Handwritten. From Karen. The first opened it with the same hesitation you'd use for a box you thought might contain something alive. It was long, rambling. She talked about her health, about all she had done for us, and how hard things had been since I cut her off. But between the lines of guilt and subtle digs, there was something else. A question. Can we please talk? I don't want to lose my son. I read it twice, then once more. Then I put it in a drawer. I didn't write back. Not right away. Instead, I talked to Dana. She's not sorry, I said. Not really. No, Dana agreed. But maybe that doesn't matter. I raised an eyebrow. She's never going to be the mom you wanted, or the grandma Mia deserves. But that doesn't mean you can't decide how you want to handle this, on your terms. That part hit me, the idea that I still had control, that I wasn't reacting anymore. I was choosing. So I sat with that for a few weeks. Then I wrote her back. Just a few lines. I got your letter. I hope you're safe. I'm open to talking, but not if the conversation is just about guilt. I'm not coming back to how things were. If you want a relationship, it has to be honest and respectful. That's the only way forward. I mailed it and let it go. Christmas came, and with it, a new kind of quiet. No drama, no guilt trips, no fake family dinners where I'd sit there wondering why I even showed up. Just the three of us in matching pajamas, eating cinnamon rolls and watching Mia lose her mind over glittery wrapping paper. It wasn't the kind of Christmas I grew up with, but it was the kind I wanted Mia to remember. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Mark. She got your letter, he said. She didn't know what to say. She doesn't have to say anything, I told him. Not yet. Not until she means it. He didn't argue. Just said, I understand. And I believed him. Spring came again, like it always does. Mia started kindergarten. Dana got a new job, day shifts, finally. I started running in the mornings, something I hadn't done since college. The world got bigger again, brighter. Then one Saturday, Mia asked something that caught me off guard. "Daddy, why don't Grandma and Grandpa come to see me?" I sat down next to her, brushing some cereal crumbs off her shirt. "Well," I said slowly, "sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, big ones. And when that happens, it takes time to fix them. If they ever get fixed at all." She thought about that for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." And that was it. Kids are funny like that. They don't need all the answers, just honesty. It was almost summer when I saw Karen again. Mark called and said she wanted to meet, just to talk. No drama, no traps. I agreed, but only if it was in public, and only if Dana came too. He said that was fair. We met at a park, on a bench near the pond. Karen looked older, thinner, like life had worn down the sharp edges she used to use as weapons. "I don't know how to start," she said. "Try the truth," I offered. She nodded. "I was wrong. About a lot of things. I lied. I made you feel like you didn't matter. I didn't even see it until I lost you." Her voice cracked, but I stayed quiet. Let her speak. "I don't expect things to go back to how they were. I don't want this to be the end." Dana reached over and took my hand. Her presence grounded me, reminded me I wasn't alone in this anymore. "I'm not angry," I finally said, "but I'm not going to pretend the past didn't happen either." Karen looked down at her hands. "I understand." "Then maybe," I said, "we start with small steps." We didn't hug. We didn't cry. It wasn't some big reunion moment from a movie. It was just two people trying. A slow rebuild on ashes still warm. Mia met her grandparents again a few weeks later, under a tree with plenty of shade and Dana by my side. It was awkward, but also peaceful. No expectations, no pretending. I set the rules. I kept the boundaries. And to their credit, Karen and Mark respected them. They never asked for money again, never tried to spin the narrative. And for once, they just showed up as people, not as victims, not as martyrs. Just flawed humans trying to reconnect. Not everything healed, but some things did. Enough. Now, years later, I still think about that moment in the living room. The envelope in my hand, my mother's lie, the rage that followed. But I don't feel it the same way anymore. It was fire, back then. Now it's just the soil where new things grew. Mia's 6 now. She calls Mark Pop. Pop, and sometimes draws pictures of our whole family stick figures holding hands in front of a house with a big red door. Karen's in the drawings too, always a little farther off to the side. But there, and me, I'm just Ethan. Husband, father, son, maybe, brother kind of. But more than that, finally, a man who chose his own path. And I didn't do it out of anger. I did it because sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is walk away. And sometimes, the bravest thing is choosing who gets to walk back in. Story 3. I used to think love could conquer anything: status, money, family expectations. I thought if you worked hard and loved harder, things would work out. That was before I met Kira's family, and before she left me for someone who checked all their boxes. We met in college. She was 21, a junior in a private business school, and I was 22, a scholarship student grinding through my computer science degree at a state university nearby. She spilled a vanilla latte on my cracked old laptop in the library, and instead of flipping out, I cracked a joke. She laughed. That's how it started. 4 years later, we were still together. Or at least I thought we were. I was 29 when it all came crashing down. Kira's parents never liked me. They never said it out loud, but I felt it. The fake smiles. The "oh, you're still working on your little project" jabs. Kira's mom would introduce me to her friends as Kira's friend from school even 2 years in. A friend. Not her boyfriend, not her partner. A friend. I lived in a small third-floor apartment that smelled faintly of curry and bleach. My landlord was a ghost. The elevator had been broken since I moved in, and my neighbor had the loudest domestic arguments this side of Reddit. But it was home. We filled the place with string lights, thrifted art, and succulents, most of which I watered. I had a rescued orange tabby named Bite, who loved to shove everything off shelves but curled up like a little furnace at night. Kira said she wasn't a cat person, but she'd whisper to him when she thought I wasn't listening. She said the money didn't matter, that she loved me for who I was, not what I had, and I believed her. Then came the dinner. Kira asked me to come to her parents' estate for a low-key family dinner. She said they were trying to get to know me better. I should have known better when she told me to wear a blazer. I owned one. It was from my cousin's wedding and barely fit anymore. I'd put on some stress weight trying to launch my startup. When I arrived, it was clear this wasn't some cozy family dinner. This was a setup. Her father's business associates were there, all with their golden boy sons, guys with law degrees, investment portfolios, and that slick, confidence-drenched energy of people who had never really failed. They talked about Aspen, their new condos, wine investments. I talked about debugging code at 3 a.m. and praying our MVP didn't break during client demos. Then came the real gut punch. Kira's mom paraded in this guy named Mason, freshly minted junior partner at a law firm her father worked with. Tall, perfect smile, Ivy League everything. She seated him next to Kira. I was across the table, stuck talking to some old finance guy who smelled like cigars and condescension. No one insulted me outright. They didn't have to. They just smiled too tightly and asked if I had a backup plan in case my little app didn't pan out. Kira didn't say a word. She used to defend me, say I was passionate, say I had vision. That night, she just sipped her wine and pretended to be fascinated by Mason's stories about tax litigation. After dinner, she complained about the stairs to my apartment. She wrinkled her nose at Bite. And a week later, she showed up with the speech. I love you, but I need stability. That word, stability. The nail in the coffin. She didn't even try to soften it. Just dropped the hammer. Said she needed someone who was already there. Someone like Mason. She didn't even deny it when I said his name. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't offer to change or get a real job. I just nodded. All right. That's all I said. 2 days later, she hard-launched her new relationship. Instagram post. Matching outfits. Luxury hotel in the Hamptons. Caption, found my forever. I was still finding her hair in the shower drain. What followed wasn't some movie montage of me getting revenge. It was slow, brutal collapse. My startup failed. My co-founder bailed. Investors pulled out. I couldn't afford rent anymore. I crashed on my best friend Darren's couch. Pixel, yeah. I renamed him Adjusted better than I did. I drove for delivery apps by day, stocked shelves at night, and tried to numb everything with exhaustion. And still, I watched. Her social media was like a highlight reel of everything I'd failed to give her. Private chefs, weekend yachts, spa days, designer bags I couldn't even pronounce. Then came the worst moment. I ran into them, Kira and Mason, at a brunch cafe. I was picking up a delivery order. Sweaty, overworked, underpaid. Mason had his arm around her, and she looked exactly like a stock photo of luxury happiness. She saw me. Our eyes met. She gave me a tight, impersonal smile, the kind you give a waiter who refills your water. And that was it. That broke me more than anything else had. That was the day I deleted everything: Instagram, Facebook, all of it. No more updates. No more watching. I went dark, and I got to work. After that run-in at the cafe, something inside me clicked. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just got real quiet with myself. You know that silence you get right before a storm? That was me, sitting in Darren's apartment, still smelling like fryer oil and gasoline, staring at the ceiling while Pixel purred next to me. I realized something. Nobody was coming to save me. So, I saved myself. I started rebuilding, not with ego this time, but with grit. I still worked delivery during the day and grocery stocking at night, but now every free second I had went into resurrecting my startup. Not the same flashy nonsense we were chasing before. That was the old me. I stripped everything down and focused on something real: legal tech. Specifically, automating contract analysis for businesses. It wasn't sexy. It wasn't viral, but it solved a real problem I'd struggled with back when I tried to read legal documents for my last company. I didn't pitch to investors this time. I bootstrapped, used my own savings, whatever was left, slept 4 hours a night, ate protein bars and instant noodles. Darren, bless him, made sure I had at least one real meal a day and didn't go completely insane. He'd bring me coffee at 2 a.m., help debug code even though he barely understood what a loop was. That guy's loyalty kept me afloat. I cut out distractions. No dating, no partying, no checking up on Kira. She became like background noise I'd tuned out. Every time I thought about her, I just told myself, you've got work to do. For 2 years, I worked in the dark. Just me, Darren, a whiteboard covered in ideas, and a slowly growing tool that started picking up attention. A few businesses tested it, then a few more. Word spread. We fixed bugs, made updates, added features. Then one day, bam, it hit. We got featured in a legal tech newsletter. One tiny shout out. That same week, one of the top 5 law firms in the country reached out for a demo. I remember sitting there on Darren's secondhand couch, staring at the email with my mouth open. I replied like a professional, but inside I was screaming. That first contract changed everything. We used the money to hire 2 engineers, then a designer, then a sales lead. By the end of the year, we had a small team and a real office. Not a WeWork, an actual office. Windows and everything. We called the company ClauseForge. No frills. Just clean, efficient, and sharp. And here's where it gets funny. Mason Kira's guy worked in corporate law. Big, traditional firm. Same one that was now losing clients because of tools like mine. They didn't know it yet, but I was coming for them. Not out of spite, out of evolution. My tech was better, faster, and more cost-efficient. It wasn't personal at first. One day, I got invited to speak at a legal tech conference. Big one. Industry heads, investors, CEOs. 2 years ago, I couldn't afford the ticket. Now I was the keynote. I stepped on that stage in a fitted suit tailored, not off the rack, talked about automation, the future of law, and how we were eliminating the need for hours of busy work. Afterwards, while I was shaking hands and swapping business cards, I noticed a familiar face in the crowd. Kira. She looked different. Same expensive clothes, same flawless makeup, but the smile was gone. She wasn't glowing anymore. Just standing off to the side, frozen. She didn't approach me. I didn't go to her. But the look in her eyes? That told me everything. Regret. Confusion. Maybe even a little awe. Later, I found out through mutual contacts that her picture-perfect relationship wasn't so perfect anymore. Mason was never home. Always working, always networking. Rumor was he'd started seeing someone else. Classic story. The kind of guy who treats people like portfolio assets, then moves on when returns drop. Kira had gone all in on comfort, and now she was stuck with someone who made her feel like a trophy gathering dust. Meanwhile, I was thriving. ClauseForge grew fast. We landed international contracts, opened a satellite office in London, another in Singapore. Clients raved. Investors begged to be let in. We were saving law firms millions, cutting contract review times from hours to minutes. And the cherry on top? We were directly cutting into Mason's firm's business. The best part? He had no idea who was behind it. Then came the twist. A month after the conference, I got a message. A very familiar number I hadn't seen in years. Hey, it's Kira. I know it's been a long time, but I'd love to catch up if you're open to it. I didn't reply. 2 days later, I miss our talks. Just want to say I'm proud of everything you've done. Still nothing. Then, one night around 8 p.m., our receptionist buzzed my office. There's a woman here to see you. Says it's important. I didn't even have to ask who. I told them to send her up. When she walked in, she looked unsure. Gone was the confident girl who once told me I wasn't in her league. She glanced around at the office minimalist. Modern, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. This is... Wow, she whispered. I leaned back in my chair. It's come a long way. She gave me a soft smile. You did too. I didn't respond. Just waited. I made a mistake, she finally said, voice low. I let other people's expectations cloud what I really wanted. I gave up something real. For something that looked right. I raised an eyebrow. And now? I don't know, she admitted. Maybe we could talk. Start over. I miss you. I paused, then stood. Buttoned my jacket. Walked around the desk slowly. I'm not angry, Kira, I said. I don't hate you. But we're not in the same place anymore. She opened her mouth to say something else. Maybe to plead. Maybe to explain, but the door opened before she could. My girlfriend stepped in. She was everything Kira wasn't. A brilliant UX designer I'd met at a tech summit. The kind of woman who believed in what we were building long before it blew up. Funny, grounded, smart as hell. She walked in carrying 2 iced coffees, gave me a wink, then looked at Kira like she wasn't even a threat. I smiled. Kira, I said gently, I did find someone in my league, just wasn't you. And with that, I walked her to the door. After I closed that office door behind Kira, it felt like the last ghost of my past had finally drifted off. No anger, no fireworks, just closure. Quiet and clean. I didn't celebrate or tell anyone what happened. Didn't need to. Some things feel better when they stay between you and the air that witnessed it. But life didn't slow down after that. ClauseForge kept scaling. Bigger clients. More hires. We opened another branch in Toronto. Our platform was getting adopted by firms I used to dream about. The same firms that once rejected our cold emails were now asking for pilot programs. Funny how things flip when you stop chasing and start building. It didn't take long for the ripple effects to reach Mason. His firm had built its whole brand on premium billing top dollar for slow, traditional work. Our platform changed that overnight. Automated contracts, AI-assisted revisions, risk analysis in real time. We cut out 80% of what their junior associates used to spend hours on. Suddenly, clients were jumping ship. We weren't just a competitor, we were the future. And they were stuck in the past. The cracks showed fast. Rumors started floating around the legal circles. Mason's firm was bleeding clients. The partners were panicking, trying to pivot, trying to catch up, but it was too late. Our tech was lean, fast, scalable. Their old school model just couldn't compete anymore. Then came the conference, a huge one. Annual industry event with media coverage and big-name execs everywhere. I was on a panel discussing the future of legal work. Midway through, one of the moderators mentioned ClauseForge and said, "On record, it's companies like these that are setting the new standard. Some legacy firms are struggling to catch up." They didn't name Mason's firm, but everyone knew. I scanned the crowd and saw him. Mason. Sitting in the back, face pale, lips tight. The guy who once gave me that smug, dismissive look across Kira's family table was now staring at me like he'd seen a ghost with $1 billion valuation. He didn't stay for the Q&A. That night, I got a message from a mutual contact, Mason had a meltdown in a partner meeting. Someone brought up ClauseForge, and he lost it. Slammed his hand on the table, called you a fraud. I just chuckled. I wasn't even mad. That man built a life on appearances, and now he was watching it crack in real time. And Kira? After that visit to my office, she tried a few more times. Sent emails. Left voicemails. One of them said she missed the person I used to be. That's the thing, though. I wasn't that person anymore. I'd grown into someone who didn't need her validation. I had new people, a new rhythm. My life was solid now, built on my own terms. Eventually, she stopped reaching out. Her parents, though, that was new. Out of nowhere, I got a congratulatory email from her mother. Polite, polished, and way too late. Then an invitation from her dad to join a private networking circle, the kind of group that used to laugh behind my back. Now they wanted me in the room. I ignored it. Then the call came. It was Kira's father. Direct, calm. "I think we should talk, son," he said. Son. As if he hadn't spent years treating me like I was dirt under his polished Oxfords. I let him speak. He mentioned opportunities, possible partnerships. Said he admired my work ethic. I could practically hear the swallowing of pride through the phone. Then he hesitated. "Look, Kira made a mistake. We all did, but maybe there's still something there. She's been through a lot." That was it for me. I didn't yell, didn't even laugh. I just said, she made her choice, and I made mine. Then I hung up. After that, I didn't hear from them again. Not directly anyway, but word travels. I found out Kira and Mason got married right before everything really fell apart. Less than a year after their wedding, Mason was demoted. The firm had to merge with a smaller competitor just to survive, and he lost his partner title. I saw a photo of them at a charity gala. They both looked stiff, strained. The sparkle was gone. They had traded ambition for appearance, depth for surface, and now they were stuck pretending it still felt like love. Meanwhile, I wasn't pretending anymore. ClauseForge kept rising. We launched a free version for startups, built a scholarship fund for underrepresented students in tech. Darren got promoted to coup. We even hired some of our earliest critics. I didn't hold grudges. I just remembered everything. And me? I had balance. I still worked like hell, but I made time for life too. Sunday hikes with my girlfriend. Coffee dates with Pixel curled up in a tote bag under the table. Friday team beers on the roof of our office, watching the skyline light up. Then one day, the last thread tied to my past finally snapped. I was at the airport, flying to Tokyo to lead our expansion into Asia. I stopped by the lounge, grabbed a drink, found a quiet spot to read some emails. That's when I saw her, Kira, sitting by the window, alone, no flashy luggage, no diamond rings, just her, scrolling through her phone like the world outside didn't matter. She looked up. Our eyes met, and for a second she looked hopeful, like she might get up, like she might say something. I didn't give her the chance. I just gave a small nod, turned away, and boarded my flight. That was it. No drama, no words, just distance. In the end, I didn't need to destroy her world. She did that on her own. And the best revenge wasn't watching her life unravel. It was realizing mine had bloomed without her in it. So yeah, if you're reading this hoping for fireworks or a final showdown, there wasn't one. Just silence and peace. The kind you earn. The kind you build brick by brick after everything burns down. TLDR. She left me for a man who looked perfect on paper. I built something real. And when she tried to come back, I had already moved on stronger, wiser, and living a life she'd never be part of again. Not because I hated her, but because I finally learned to love myself more.